If there is a proposed change to election law in some state out there that Republicans, conservatives disagree with, you can debate whether or not that's a good idea to pass.
Yeah.
But once it's passed, you have to do that better than the Democrats. Make them regret their decision to implement it in the first place.
Representative Zeldin, thank you so much for stopping by our New York City office. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Yeah, well, welcome. I want to dive right in. We're going to talk about the 2022 elections. You are a former member of Congress. Your term just ended, and you ran for governor this past fall against Governor Kathy Hochul. And I wanted to kind of pick your brain a little bit. You came within 6 percentage points, of course, of winning, much more than any Republican candidate in recent memory for that election. You got 47% of the vote, which many people sort of said, there's no way that, especially given how many Republicans have left the state due to draconian COVID policies and rising crime rates and et cetera. Many people kind of wrote off New York as being probably even more blue than before. What was it that you told yourself when you told your campaign staff as you went into that campaign to say, hey, this might be a winnable race?
And that would be an accurate analysis that it was becoming more blue. 3.3 million more Democrats than Republicans. Of all registered voters in the state, only 22% of the state are registered as Republicans. So certainly an uphill battle for any Republican. At the end of the day, we got more Republican votes than any statewide Republican candidate in 52 years. And that included Republicans, Democrats, independents too. It was a broad coalition. Working hard, not just in areas where people were typically voting Republican in the past, but getting to places the Republicans hadn't been in a really long time to earn the support from communities that had been voting Democrat, different constituencies. We won the Asian American vote, for example, here in New York City, Chinatown and Manhattan, Sunset Park in Brooklyn, Flushing in Queens. It's a predominantly Democratic constituency, but the message of improving the quality of education in our schools, making our streets safer, it connected with them as it did with Dominicans or Orthodox Jews and others. So that type of hard work, starting early, 19 months to the day before the election, putting together a good team, having a good strategy, working hard, taking absolutely nothing for granted. We were all in, all day, every day. And fortunately, while we might have come up just short in our race, a whole bunch of different congressional districts in this state flipped. So we did our part here in New York to make sure that the Democrats were no longer in charge of Washington. Nancy Pelosi no longer had a speaker's gavel. And now the Republicans are in charge of the House.
So unlocking new constituencies, tapping into the distrust that many New Yorkers have with how Democrats have run the state for so long. I'm wondering if I can ask you about mail-in voting, because there was a lot of GOP operatives who were discouraging mail-in voting or absentee voting, or saying, hey, if you're going to do an absentee vote, just bring it in election day to avoid any chances of something happening with that. And do you think that was a mistake for the Republicans to discourage mail-in voting? And if so, how would you encourage them to approach it going into future elections?
If there is a proposed change to election law in some state out there that Republicans, conservatives disagree with, you can debate whether or not that's a good idea to pass. But once it's passed, you have to do that better than the Democrats. Make them regret their decision to implement it in the first place. Nevada is a great example where they weren't leaning into ballot harvesting. They weren't leaning into early voting. And then you had a big storm hit northern Nevada, and then all of a sudden you're losing a Senate seat that you would have otherwise won had you been leaning into those laws. So my message to conservatives, you stand up for what you believe in advocating, debating, informing, educating, when there's a proposed change that you disagree with. But once the Democrats actually pass the change, beat them at their own game.
I think that makes sense. So let's talk about New York for just a second, and then we'll move on. In 2024, there's a Senate seat up for grabs, and there are, of course, the congressional races down ballot and the state Senate and representative elections. What do you see as some achievable goals for the New York GOP in 2024, and what needs to happen between now and then to get to that point?
In 2018, the Republican candidate for governor got about 15% of the vote in New York City. We got just over 30% of the vote. We need to keep building off of that. That means that this year, in New York City Council races and other local races across the state, we have to be working hard everywhere, red areas, blue areas, it doesn't matter, to make sure that we're recruiting the best candidate, that they're running a fantastic campaign, and we're getting them elected wherever possible. And we do have a great opportunity to flip a lot of seats this November. This needs to be viewed as a bridge to the future. I spent a lot of my time inside of New York City to get 30% of the vote.
Yeah.
I knew that if we got less than 30% of the vote, we'd have no chance of winning.
Sure.
If we got 35% or more, then it starts to become difficult to lose.
Yeah.
I had to spend a lot of my time in the city to get 30%. What we need to do is get to the point where 4 years from now, the Republican candidate is able to spend a little bit less time inside of the city and get 35% or more.
Yeah.
That means you can't wait until it's 3.5 years from now and then all of a sudden wake up and start campaigning against in the city. You need to work on this over the next 3.5 years. And the same thing leading into places like Syracuse and Rochester and Buffalo and elsewhere all around the state. It's a big, diverse state. The reality is if you took 4 of the 5 boroughs of New York City off of the map, it's a red state.
Yeah.
But because of those 4 heavily populated Democratic enrollment advantages that exist throughout these 4 counties, it becomes a blue state. But we have to build upon the progress that was made. I will tell you that there are a lot of Democrats who are waiting with open arms when I was showing up in their area. We wonder as conservatives, why is it that somebody would continue to vote Democrat when Democratic policies are harming them?
Yeah.
And we make a really bad assumption. We think that that means that they're going to start voting Republican. It doesn't just simply work like that. The reason why they're not voting Republican is because they believe the devil you know is better than the devil you don't.
Yeah.
Republicans have to earn their support. They actually think, well, they might be critical of the Democratic Party. There are a lot of people out there who are open-minded, but for now, they actually think that the Republican Party is even worse.
Sure.
So we have to show up and keep showing up over and over and over again. And every race that's on the ballot, nothing should be left off the map. Recruit great candidates for everything and try to win whatever you can.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You cannot leave New York City, especially, to just say the Democrats have that. Let's shift a little bit from elections to policy a little bit and talk about the New York State budget. Governor Hochul recently announced that there's an $8.7 billion surplus in the state. Pretty large number. I'm wondering what you can tell me about, now she's announcing all these new plans and policies and finding ways to spend this money. Is it a good thing that we have a surplus? And if not, why did we get to this place? And how can we spend this responsibly but prevent this from happening in the future?
Fortunately, at times along the way, the people who are in power, regardless of party, put estimates of tax receipts of the next year.
Yeah.
Hoping that you're not going to end up with any shocking surprise where you don't have enough money to make it through the fiscal year.
Mm-hmm.
That's a better way of doing budgeting than to be overly optimistic.
Yeah.
And that you're having some dream scenario of all the tax receipts that you'll have, and then can you make it through the fiscal year?
Yeah.
So that part's good. But the question is now, what do you do with the surplus?
Sure.
At the beginning of September, New York State businesses were hit with an unemployment insurance tax. Why? Because New York during the pandemic took out a multi-billion-dollar loan from the federal government for unemployment insurance. Now, what many other states did was, in the years that then followed, including when they were getting these bailouts from the federal government, is that they were paying down their balance. Not blue Democratic-run states like New York. Yeah. And instead of paying down the balance, as a government with this money that you're getting from the federal government, they spent it on whatever their political partisan priorities are.
Yeah.
And then they send this letter that was unexpected to these business owners. Hey, at the beginning of September, you're going to owe all this money.
Yeah.
They're proposing a new MTA payroll tax hike, but not proposing that the MTA operate more efficiently.
Right.
They have even more money getting put into Medicaid, which has just gotten way out of control here in the state. But whereas Governor Hochul's demands, calls for important reforms to make sure it operates more efficiently, totally MIA on this issue.
Yeah.
I don't even know if she is aware of how to propose a change
Sure.
to Medicaid or the people around her. It's actually a real possibility that they just have absolutely no idea how to make Medicaid operate more efficiently, even though we could spend hours talking about the many different ways that the rest of us who pay attention to that stuff knows how to make it operate more efficiently. So while it's good always to have a surplus, you have to be responsible in what you do with it. And right now there's a lot of people in the legislature who only have experience signing one side of a check. There are people in the state legislature who keep running for re-election because that's the only job that they're qualified to have, which is pretty scary. And they're the ones deciding how to spend billions of dollars. And instead of thinking smartly with it, they have their own asks of how to blow through that money. And once that money is spent, it's wasted, it's gone.
Yeah. One big prominent example of a lot of taxpayer money being spent in the state was, of course, the Buffalo Bills Stadium, which Governor Hochul championed and brokered this deal, spending over $850 million of public money for the stadium. You came out against that. You said that she could have gotten a better deal for that. Why do you think that is? And why is it so important that we push these deals to be as responsible as possible?
I mean, here we are in the middle of Manhattan having this conversation, and the fact is that any person who right now is within a 4-mile radius around us would have been able to negotiate a better deal.
Okay.
And it's a reality that when a governor gets rolled, the state gets rolled. When a president of the United States gets rolled by some foreign adversary abroad, the whole country gets rolled. And in this case, she ended up getting rolled at the negotiating table.
Yeah.
Tactically, it was a mistake on so many different levels. She wasn't informing the state legislative leaders that, hey, in the 11th hour of this budget negotiation, I might be dropping this new deal. I want to make sure that you have a heads up. What questions do you have? Let's have a confidential briefing. I could answer questions. Instead, the whole thing comes out of nowhere. So that upsets a lot of people.
Yeah.
Then you have the dollar amount to it, which is unprecedented to be spending that level of money. The reality is we need to keep the Buffalo Bills in Buffalo.
Yeah.
Much of New York has that as maybe their top priority. If you've been to the stadium where the Bills play, it is a stadium that you could tell from the outside before you even get inside. Like, wow, this is not what an NFL level stadium looks like, just with the construct of it and the aging.
Sure.
It has a Friday night light feel to it, of Texas, Florida, Texas football on a Friday night, and a great vibe inside. The energy is awesome. The Bills fans are loyal. The tailgating is part of a culture where they start, days prior sometimes.
Yeah.
So there's this need to keep the Bills there. However, that doesn't mean that you're giving the billionaire owner of this team a blank check.
Yeah.
So there's just so much bipartisan concern with how the whole thing happened on the tactics and the substance. And I'm fully confident that we pulled anyone random off of the street, even if they've been here in New York for just a couple minutes, they would have been able to get a better deal.
And to be clear, you're not just saying this because you're a Giants fan. Is that right?
Listen, it's regardless of whether you're and I'm a Giants fan.
Yes.
Which is one of the reasons why I had to root against the Eagles.
Yeah.
But that aside, and then the Bills fans would be like, oh, by the way, the Giants,
Yeah.
where do they play? And then, yeah, that's true. The Giants and Jets play in Jersey.
Yep.
It's something I would say, even if you're a Giants or Jets fan, as a proud New Yorker, we all see the need to protect this Bills team. We're all proud of this Bills team in a way, even if that's not your number one team.
Yep.
But this is not how you do this. And if you're the governor of the state of New York, you're a steward of tax dollars for the people you're supposed to represent. And you can't allow yourself to get rolled like that. I mean, this was done voluntarily. This was done enthusiastically.
Sure.
She enthusiastically got rolled in this deal, which is maybe the biggest insult. It wasn't even that she didn't know what she was doing. By design, in many respects, she got rolled at the table.
Yeah. So let's shift from, you're saying, this sorts of issues that really shouldn't be top concern of the tax dollar for the city of New York. Let's talk about some city issues to shift that a little bit. Two of the big things that have come up have been the surge in crime, especially violent crime in the last couple of years in the city. The second one being migrants and the influx of illegal immigration to the city. Let's talk about crime for just a second. And there's been a big uptick, especially over the last couple of years. You've mentioned cashless bail, which was implemented in 2019 as one of the primary causes of that. And progressives will say, well, that's because it doesn't apply to violent crime. That can't be responsible for the uptick in violent crime. Where do you see that link, and what other proposals would you think are important in reforming?
The one-party Democratic rule in Albany, they believe that they haven't gone far enough in passing pro-criminal laws.
Yep.
They want to go even further, and there's many different ways that they want to do that. There are people who are serving up in Albany who are against policing. Whether it's rhetoric or policy, they will put the handcuffs on the criminal justice system instead of putting the handcuffs on criminals. They don't believe that streets should belong to law-abiding New Yorkers instead of criminals, and deeply committed to doing what they need to actually make sure that law-abiding New Yorkers and others who are visiting can feel safe on streets and subways. I look at it primarily threefold. One is you can't be passing pro-criminal laws.
Right.
We should be rolling back cashless bail. Judges should have discretion to weigh dangerousness. We should roll back, raise the age, less is more, the HALT Act, the discovery law changes. We know what to do to actually fix this from a policy standpoint. On day one, if elected, I would have declared a crime emergency here in the state and suspended all the laws that I just mentioned, forced the legislature to the table to enact the changes that we need. The second piece of it is that we need DAs doing their jobs.
Yeah.
You have district attorneys like Alvin Bragg refusing to enforce the law. I mean, he came out with this day one memo. His first day on the job, he said publicly that he is not going to be doing his job on all of these different laws.
Right.
He should be fired. There's other district attorneys like Alvin Bragg who are just not doing the right thing. We've seen it at times coming out of the Bronx DA with the Jesus Cortez case, and there are too many other examples.
Yeah.
The third piece of it is we need to be unapologetically backing our men and women in law enforcement. I was raised in a law enforcement household. I was running with a 25-year veteran of the NYPD, Allison Esposito, who's a strong, secure our streets platform. And as far as supporting law enforcement, it is understood by law enforcement, by supporters of law enforcement, that there are bad apples in all occupation. And I don't think anyone is more upset by a bad cop's actions than a good cop.
Yeah.
And we need to ensure that if one person does something wrong and you're holding that person correctly accountable for something that they did wrong, that you don't try to hamstring 99% of the rest of the people in that particular department who are selfless, dedicated, courageous heroes who are willing to give up their lives to protect somebody who might have been spitting in their face and calling them a racist just moments earlier. So I would say that if you're trying to frame an approach towards criminal justice and how to secure our streets, look at the laws that are on the books and how to improve them. Make sure the people responsible for enforcing the law are actually doing it. And then thirdly is making sure that we're not setting our cops up for failure, whether it's passing a law enforcement Bill of Rights or otherwise stepping up for our amazing men and women in blue who are doing the right thing. You are well on your way if your mindset is focused on those three prongs. So you also asked about immigration. And the reality is we need the federal government to do their part.
Yeah.
Whether you're a blue city mayor, a red city mayor, a red state governor, a blue state governor, if everybody everywhere was totally on the same exact page, they can't solve this. It's going to continue to get worse the next day because the federal government, the Biden administration, isn't doing what they need to on our southern border. So whether that's finishing construction of the border wall, ending catch and release, enforcing the Remain in Mexico policy, stop incentivizing and rewarding illegal entry, support our Customs and Border Patrol agents. There's so much that can and should get done by the federal government, by the Biden administration that they're not doing. And that is how you actually have a shot at dealing with this migrant crisis. You can't solve it if the federal government isn't going to do what they need to do.
Sure.
As far as what's next, we'll see.
Okay.
I'm committed to public service.
Yes.
I am in my 20th year in the Army. I just had reserve duty a couple of weeks ago. I love serving in the military. I spent the last 8 years of my life serving in the House of Representatives. I do believe that there's a re-entry to government at some point. I don't know what that is or when that is. We'll see. In the meantime, I'm committed to doing everything in my power to help save our state, to help save our country. There are important local elections, state, national elections that will be coming up over the course of these next couple years. I want to do my part.
Yeah.
And I'm 43. There's still plenty of opportunity to stay involved, engaged, and to make a difference. In the meantime, my daughter's in her 11th grade.
Yeah.
18 months away from college.
Yeah.
And I am enjoying the little things in life that might have been missed because I had votes in the House that day.
Sure. Yeah, already. Well, Representative Zeldin, thank you so much for your time.
You got it. Thank you.
And best of luck in the future. Thank you so much.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate it.